Use the quadratic formula to solve the equation x squared plus 64 equals 0. So the quadratic formula wouldn't be my first pick here. In fact, the easiest way to solve this is to just observe that you have a quadratic and that in that quadratic there is no linear term. And therefore, what you can do is just take all of your constants to the other side of the equation, take the square root of both sides. When we take the square root of a squared variable, we do have to consider the positive or negative solution to that. So x equals the plus or minus square root of negative 64. And when we're taking the square root of a negative, if we're allowing ourselves to work with complex values, you can factor that out as I. And then you have I times the square root of 64. And since 64 is a perfect square, we can simplify that down to plus or minus 8i. That to me would be the simplest way, but if you really felt like using the quadratic formula, you absolutely could. In the quadratic formula, you have your standard quadratic, which is ax squared plus bx plus c. And so in this case, a is equal to 1, b is equal to 0, and c is equal to 64. So when we solve it using the quadratic formula, it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. Whoops, I meant to write that in as 1. All over 2 times a. So the 0 we can ignore. Now we have plus or minus 4 times 64. I don't know what that is right off the top of my head, but let's find out. 4 times 64 is 256. So the square root of negative 256 all over 2. And 256, that might actually be a perfect square itself. Let's see. It is. Okay, so it's 16 squared. So the negative will come out as I. So this will be I times 16 over 2. And then 2 will go into 16 and leave a factor of 8. So we still end up with plus or minus 8i. But I would dare say that that was a little bit more difficult than just using the best strategy to solve it.